I'm delighted to see so many of you here for our 14th Pinderhughes Diversity Lecture. The strength and the great reputation of Boston College School of Social Work in the field is because of the work of its faculty, staff, and students. This morning, or I should say this afternoon, we are proud to celebrate and recognize the work and contributions of Professor Elaine Pinderhughes, both to our School of Social Work and the profession at large. Professor Pinderhughes is the former chair of BC School of Social Work's clinical program. Her groundbreaking 1989 textbook, Understanding Race, Ethnicity, and Power, The Key to Efficacy in Clinical Practice, is credited by the Council on Social Work Education with providing the rubric for culturally competent practice across the human services disciplines. In 2017, Professor Pinderhughes co-edited Under Power, an Imperative for Human Services, published by the NASW Press. She has served as Lydia Rappaport Professor at Smith College School of Social Work and Lucille Austin Fellow at Columbia University, and held the Moses Chair at Hunter College School of Social Work. Professor Pinderhughes helped establish and participates annually in this lecture series that bears her name. In 2019, Professor Pinderhughes was named an NASW Social Work Pioneer. NASW Pioneer Program honors members of the social work profession who have contributed to the evolution and enrichment of the profession. The Pioneer Program identifies and recognizes individuals whose unique dedication, commitment, and determination have improved social and human conditions. Thanks for coming to celebrate Professor Pinderhughes' contributions to social work and our school. We'll hear from her after the lecture. Now, we had to cancel last year's event as we closed the campus due to the pandemic. Therefore, I'm doubly honored because of our guest who will deliver this year's Pinderhughes lecture, and it is well worth the wait. Dr. Butler-Barnes from Washington University's Brown School of Social Work has once again agreed to deliver the lecture this year that we had to unfortunately cancel last year. Professor Butler-Barnes is a developmental psychologist who studies the impact of racism and the use of culturally strength-based assets on the educational and health outcomes of Black American adolescents. Before joining the Brown School, Butler-Barnes was an NSF postdoctoral fellow at the University of Michigan's School of Education, which is affiliated with the Center for Study of Black Youth in Context. Butler-Barnes received her PhD and MA from Wayne State University in developmental psychology and a BS in psychology from Michigan State University. Her research agenda includes two particular areas of focus. One, the strengths-based assets of Black adolescents project explores how Black youth draw on personal and cultural assets and resources to thrive despite challenges to their identities from interpersonal experiences of racism. The second focus of her work is Celebrating Strengths of Black Girls Project, which focuses on advancing equity for women and girls of color. So without any further delay, I invite Dr. Butler-Barnes.
Thank you all for having me. I'm now going to share my screen so I can share my presentation with you all. And I hope that you all can see this at this time. Thank you again for inviting me. I'm very excited to be here. Professor Pinderhughes is definitely an honor. The work that I do is really inspired by your work in making sure that Black girls' voices are centered and that they are visible and they own their own storytelling. I definitely stand on your shoulders. Thank you again. This is an honor. So the title of this talk today is Ain't I a Woman? Revisiting and Reclaiming African-American Girls' Racialized and Gendered Experiences Within the Classroom. And so to present an overview to you all, I'm going to be talking about intersectionality and why that matters and why it's important that, and how this centered on really about increasing the invisibility of Black women, highlighting the invisibility of Black women. I'm going to be talking about the importance of Black girlhood, present some research findings, and where we need to go in this future work as practitioners and scholars in this very important area. And so first I'd like to highlight Sojourner Truth, who was an abolitionist and a women's rights advocate. And in her famous 1851 Ohio Women's Rights Convention, she talked about Ain't I a Woman, right? This was her famous speech, which really centered on promoting and advocating for racial and gender justice. And in one of her quotes, she began to really highlight the unique experiences of being a Black woman. She says here, with children, where there is so much ragged, there must be something out of kilter. I think that between the Negroes of the South and the women at the North, all talking about rights, the white man will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me in the carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place, and ain't I a woman? And so here she's really highlighting and talking about the invisibility of her space during the 19th century and being a Black woman and not afforded the same luxury as Black men at that time or even white women. And then we move into Mary Church Terrell, who's a Black suffragist and activist and served 50 years in this role. In 1896, she was the first president of the National Association of Colored Women, and she was a charter member of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Very important work. And so one of her quotes that sort of stood out to me, that was a catalyst of me, really the beginning of me doing this work and understanding why it's important to center Black girls' experiences. She then says, a white woman has only one handicap to overcome, that of sex. I have two, both sex and race. Colored men have only one, that of race. Colored women are the only group in this country who have two heavy handicaps to overcome, that of race as well as that of sex. So here it is, Mary Church Terrell is also highlighting the unique lived experiences of being a Black woman. And then we have the Combahee River Collective, which has legacy and roots in Boston. And so this particular collective first met at a National Black Feminist Organization regional conference in 1973. And later they began to have regular meetings. At one of these meetings, they chose their name based off this river raid of 1863 that was led by Harriet Tubman. And in this collective statement, a very powerful, over 40 years ago, a very powerful quote that inspired this work that I'm doing is this right here. It was our experience and disillusionment within these liberation movements, as well as our experience on the periphery of the white male left, that led to the need to develop a politics that was anti-racist, unlike those of white women, and anti-sexist, unlike those of Black and white men. So here it is, over 40 years ago, this particular group of women were really using this language about anti-racism and anti-sexism and really advocating for the rights of Black women at that time. And now we move into the work of intersectionality, where it came from Kimberly Crenshaw, who really coined that term and really highlighting through her legal studies the unique experiences of being Black and being a woman. Because from her view, what she saw was that when we have these conversations about women, they're all white. Or when we have conversations about Black, they're all men. And something that she said that stood out to me is that intersectionality is what occurs when a woman from a minority group tries to navigate the main crossing in the city. The main highway is Racism Road. One cross street can be colonialism, then Patriarchy Street. She has to not only deal with one form of oppression, but with all forms of oppression. And so those named as road signs, which link together to make a double, triple, multiple, a many layered blanket of oppression. And so we see this work and also acknowledging Angela Davis, Bell Hooks, Patricia Hill Collins, and other scholars who have really honed in and sort of increased the invisibility of Black women by noting their unique racialized and gendered experiences. And now we sort of move into the importance of Black girlhood, which is really sort of standing on the shoulders of these women, because we also, through Black girlhood, want to acknowledge and sort of center the experience and the voices of Black girls. And so giving much credit to our historians, particularly historians in the 19th century, wanted to understand what it was like for Black girls at that particular time, particularly in slavery. But yet, as they went through doing archival research and going through these various documents and transcripts and whatever they can find, they found that Black girls' voices were not there. That when we talked about girlhood or looking for childhood at that time, that Black girls did not show up. And so Owens builds on these insights by really exploring and finding through their own scholarship that white people's refusal to recognize Black girls as either children or adolescents really stripped them of time privileges. And therefore, it is imperative to find the voices of Black girls and in Black girlhood. And so one of the sort of seminal pieces that really started Black girlhood studies was written by Harriet Ann Jacobs, who was a former slave, in her Incidences in the Life of a Slave Girl, where this was an autobiographical account of her escaping from slavery and becoming an abolitionist, but also being reflective about that particular experience that happened to her over time. And so this is where we began to be intentional about centering the experience and the voices of Black girls. And so Black girlhood studies, we're now seeing the importance of Black girls in education, in social work. We're now seeing it in sociology, and we're now seeing among our educators, and really trying to center Black girls' voices. And then as a result of this, there are some similar themes that are found in these studies. And so according to Noon, Black girls spoke about the negative teacher-student relationships and their bodies being policed in their particular study. And this is through qualitative work. Carter Andrews found that Black girls, in having conversations with them, were compared with white femininity standards, loaded up with negative stereotypes, received unfair discipline. They were hypersexualized and adultified and viewed as being not intelligent. Butler also found that in predominantly white spaces, Black girls perceived lower academic expectations from their teachers. And so here we have being intentional about centering Black girls' voices. We have here that Black girls are noting their negative experiences within the classroom. And so this leads to adultification of Black girls. So in an important report that was in a very seminal report, Girlhood Interrupted, the Erasure of Black Girls' Childhood, Epstein, Blake, and Gonzalez found a couple of things, right? And so they asked a community sample of white participants about their views of Black girls. And what they found was particularly alarming. And so in comparison to white girls, these particular, these folks felt as if Black girls needed less nurturing, they needed less protection, they needed to be supported less, they needed to be comforted less. Black girls were viewed as being more independent. Black girls, they felt, knew more about adult topics, and that Black girls knew more about sex. So I want us to just let this sit here for a minute, because if we look at the way in which some scholarship or even the media situates Black girls' experiences, it aligns with what was found in this particular report. And so we have the adultification of Black girls. And so Monique Morris, who does very important work, who is the author of the book, Push Out, The Criminalization of Black Girls in Schools, said something that sort of stood with me that built on the work of what Sojourner Truth and Mary Church Terrell and other prominent Black feminists were saying about the experiences of Black women. And so she says the assignment of more adult-like characteristics to the expressions of young Black girls is a form of age compression. Along this truncated age continuum, Black girls are likened more to adults than to children and are treated as if they are willfully engaging in behaviors typically expected of Black women. This compression has stripped Black girls of their childhood freedoms and renders Black girlhood interchangeable with Black womanhood. This statement alone underscores what folks have been saying over time about Black girlhood being lost, about Black girls being viewed older than what they are, being viewed as more sexually promiscuous in comparison to other populations. And so this is what we have to begin to really unlearn when we are studying and trying to understand Black girls' experiences within the classroom. And so now I want to share some of my own work and where I was guided by, right? Two theories, Black feminist theory and Garcia Cole's model that I'm going to talk about. And so in drawing on Black feminist theory, this provides an intersectional framework to understand, for me, how Black girls manage to attain acknowledgement, respect, and achievement in academic settings that deem them less than due to their race and gender identities. And it also challenges us to move beyond descriptions of Black girls' experiences as students by noting the anti-racist experiences, anti-sexist solutions that we need to provide that will eradicate their ongoing marginalization. So there's this anti-Blackness that's going on, and we need to promote anti-racist and anti-sexist solutions. So for me, Black feminist theory provides me a framework to sort of do that. And really, most importantly, Black girls' experiences in the classroom are oftentimes untold or misunderstood, because in the research literature or even the programming that we all do as practitioners either focuses on race or gender as independent constructs. And so again, we need to be intersectional when we talk about the experiences of Black girls. And I also draw on the integrative model for the developmental competencies of minority children. This is particularly important for me because based on Black girls' unique social position, their race, ethnicity, and gender and class, these experiences may mean something differently within a school setting. And also Garcia Cole posits that the school environment can serve either as a space that promotes learning, or it can serve as a space that inhibits learning. And in thinking about the erasure of Black girlhood that has happened over time, the way in which Sojourner Truth talked about her own lived experience, the incidences of a slave girl telling her story, we now have to be intentional about understanding the experiences of Black girls. And so what I did was I had 4 focus groups conducted with 30 Black adolescent girls. I used a semi-structured interview guide that was used to stimulate conversations with girls about their racialized and gendered experiences in a classroom, their attitudes and beliefs, and their academic performance. And so the questions centered on their racial identity, their racial and gender discrimination experiences, and just also overall their learning. And so some of the questions, what is it like at your school? How do your teachers treat you at your school? What are your expectations at your school? And how are you and your peers or friends treated? How do you perceive that? And what's interesting about this is that I'll tell you all about the context on the next slide. But what's interesting is that, we really were intentional about as a research team and making sure that we capture Black girls' voices verbatim. We went back and forth with coding. We used constructivism that guided us. It sort of helped us center Black girls with being mindful of the theories that we chose that provided us an opportunity to do this. And then we went back and forth, really trying to understand the conversational patterns that Black girls were having, but we wanted to be intentional and make sure that we were capturing their voices. And so we didn't go back and sort of, doing the spell check or, going back and using Grammarly. We wanted to make sure the way in which we talked about Black girls were representative of their authentic voices. And so what's interesting about this is that we were also very intentional about pulling Black girls from different diverse school settings, because we understood that if we're interested in space, if we're interested in how Black girls show up, then we wanted to be intentional about the different learning and spaces that they were in. So again, it's 30 Black adolescent girls. The mean age was 12. Grade point average range from 2.0 to 3.6. And the GPA was on average a C, and parents' income ranged between $40,000 and $50,000 per year. And as we see on this first table, we were intentional about making sure that Black girls came from predominantly white schools. Some of them came from predominantly Black schools, and then schools that were racially and ethnically diverse. And so as you see here on the table, we have about maybe, we really tried to make sure that that Black girls from each school, like we had good representation from these schools. And so 5 major themes appeared in our work that I would like to talk to you all about. And then I'm going to share some quotes. So number 1, discipline, which corroborates research at the national level in terms of what Black girls are going through. So discipline, differential treatment by teachers, staff, and administrators when dealing with Black students versus white students. There was also this misconception of Black intelligence, students' inability to perceive their Black peers as intelligent people. Peers in that environment associate intelligence with whiteness or white peers. Lack of support. This is negative, or the lack of support from teachers in an academic setting. This also involves teachers whose actions are perceived as intrusive. There were issues of colorism, students receiving aggression from other students based on skin tone. And also Black girls had to contend with racial stereotypes that sort of came through. Negative racial views, attitudes, and beliefs about persons from a particular racial ethnic group, negative statements and treatment based on these stereotypes. And now I'd like to get into some of the quotes to sort of show you all sort of the narrative across these different school settings that Black girls, by centering Black girls' voices, where we were able to sort of find out about their experiences. And so we have discipline. And so we were asking students about Black girls about, their treatment in school, their, how they felt attached to the school. And a lot of these conversations came from further probing. And so we have one of the students that mentioned when she talked about school discipline, right? She talked about, hey, at my school, and I don't still remember this, I had a teacher, Miss Laura, and she said nobody could ask for help, but she didn't explain the work correctly. So I raised my hand and she yelled at me and she said I was going to be in trouble. But then this Caucasian boy, he raised his hand and she called on him and he got to ask her for help. And she just yelled at me after she was done talking to him. And I didn't even say nothing. And so here it is, we have a Black girl that is asking for help, clarification on an assignment, but yes, she's being yelled at. And then she's also reprimanded as well. And then we have another conversation that we had with students where we tried to probe a little bit further because they were saying that some of the teachers gave them sort of special attention. And we wanted to know and have them talk a little bit more about what that attention was like. So the interviewer says, so following up, some of you said that the teachers treat you special. Does that mean special that they treat you special on a good day, or special meaning like they treat you differently? One of the students said, they give us a little more focus. They do. They focus on us more than white kids. Like if we start talking, we get in trouble. But those kids across the room, they're cracking up and they don't get in trouble at all. And what was interesting about this was that this occurred during advisory period where students were able to get free time. But the simple fact that Black girls sort of were having these conversations, and yeah, they may have been loud, but when the other group had the conversations, that was a non-Black group, they tended to get in trouble for their behavior. And so also we wanted to probe a little bit further. So, we asked the kids, so when you say that you can say anything, so do you find out you can do one little thing and you'll get in trouble versus the other kids? And so one of the students said, Leah, like cell phones. If our cell phones go off or the teachers hear the cell phone, it's automatically 1 day in school suspension. But like white girls, and then in gym, we can have our cell phone though, but it's like the white girls, they bring theirs and the teachers don't say nothing to them, but they're quick to say something to us. And so you see 2 sets of behavior where Black girls are experiencing their phone may go off in the classroom, right? Another student's phone may go off, but Black girls are receiving in-school suspension. This finding here corroborates research at the national level that sort of shows that Black girls receive in-school suspension for very minor disciplinary, like minor things they're doing, very minor. And so you see here, this child talked about the cell phone going off and experiencing and having to go to in-school suspension. And so this is particularly important here because this gets at the support in school. And so one of the students says, so there was this woman. So it's some Caucasian people and some Black people in my class. So at my old school, we do have some, we have, she's a Caucasian. So if we do something, then she'll just tell our parents and stuff. But if somebody else do something that's Caucasian, she's just going to leave it alone, like let it just be. Then I'm like, that's not fair. Then my teacher who Black too, she don't think it's fair but she got to obey the rules. And so even in these spaces where other Black teachers know that Black girls are not being treated fair, they also understand or acknowledge these Black girls that Black teachers don't have the autonomy or the agency to defend them in these spaces, which we thought and identified and was very much alarmed about in these conversations. And now we have the misconception of Black intelligence. We have a conversation between students talking about what their experience is like. And so student one says, they have this class in my school called EPIC, and people were like surprised because I'm a Black person and it's for higher IQ people. And they were like surprised a Black person who could be in that class. Oh my God, like Black people have brains, who knew? And then another student jumps in and says, well, my teacher used to split Black people, dark on one side and the other white. She treated us like we were dumb and stupid, and the white people, she helped them. When the Black people raised their hand, she didn't help them. And then one of the students was so alarmed, she said she was allowed to do that. What? And so this child ended up talking about how her mother had to come up to school, advocate for her, but also she had to pull her out of that school and also speak to the superintendent, because this teacher was literally separating these children based on their race and treating them different and providing them with different learning opportunities. And also in further probing, students also mentioned that, you just have to work hard. You have to work extra hard. It's like harder for us. It's already harder for girls, but when you're a Black girl, it's way harder. So again, these students are really noticing what's going on. The fact that you have to work harder that you're Black, but then absolutely because you're a Black girl, you have to work a little bit harder. And that was something that was definitive in what they stated. And so here we talk about the lack of support that Black girls perceived. And this story that was told to us was really alarming. And I have, throughout, you all saw that I've sort of bolded and underlined things because those are some of the things that stood out to us. And so here you see the student talking about a situation that happened to her. Mind you, these students are in middle school, but she remembered this incident from when she was in kindergarten. And so she says, I was in kindergarten and I was in my teacher's class, and we were in the class and we were on our way to a field trip, and I fell asleep on the bus. And this little kid came up and stuck his hand in my pants. And so I told the teacher and I asked her not to tell anybody. So I tell her, and then she yells it out in front of the entire class. She literally says, if he sticks his hand in your pants, you go up to him and you be like, don't do that. But then she also noticed that this little white girl, she's in my class at the time, and she has something happen to her where the teacher actually went to go get a counselor to assist this young white girl. And the counselor wouldn't tell anybody. And she went up and the teacher took her off and talked to her in private. And it just shocked me. So this incident happened to a white girl in her class. The white girl asked the teacher not to say anything. The counselor was brought in and her story was kept private. And this Black girl was in tears telling the story. And because it shocked her so much, this happened in kindergarten. Also, we have lack of support in another story where we have a student talking about their experiences going up to a principal and needing assistance. And so the principal and assistant principal are white. So what's the point of going up to them? Like whether or not, you have to defend what you say, but it really doesn't matter what you say to them. So it's no point of going to them. Just defend yourself, and wherever it goes, at least you stood proud for what you believed in. And so throughout these conversations, there were incidences where Black girls felt as if they were indeed having these conversations. They knew they wouldn't be supported, but they seemed to form a sisterhood with each other and really acknowledging and understanding that even though they didn't receive the type of support that they wanted, but they knew to stand up for their rights. And then we have issues of colorism, where Black girls were given nicknames based on their skin tone. This was a treatment that one young lady received from peers in her environment, and this was a racially and ethnically diverse school that promoted racial and social justice, which was made clear by these young ladies, but they gave her a nickname of Black Thunder. And they also represented that and sort of called her that because she was darker than everyone in her class. And then when we probed a little bit further about how that makes her feel, she mentioned, it doesn't make me feel good because like there are other Black people in my class, but they don't represent them because of their skin color. But the fact that they do it only to me, and that makes me feel bad, and then they laugh about it. And then she says, after we asked her, so are you the only person like, that's your skin color in your class? She says, well, no, there are other Black people in the class. I am just the darkest. And so with this exchange here, I'm not going to read everything, but I'm just going to highlight to you all that in this conversation, this young lady went back and forth, and other students sort of stepped in to sort of help her tell her story, which she felt affirmed and validated. But because of her darker skin tone, white students came up with names where they called some of the students baked chicken because of their skin tone. They called some students fried chicken, but they end up calling her burnt chicken. And so what happened was she would then retreat to herself, because when people did stuff like that, she just would ignore them for the rest of the day. And she would isolate herself from everybody in the classroom, but yet she got in trouble for that. And then when we asked her, about if there was any teacher assistance at this time, she noticed and told us that teachers or administrators didn't help her. She says, I mean, like there are students around, but the teachers, they don't really notice or care or understand. They just think it's some silly situation, but it actually hurts me. Again, this is in a school that's racially and ethnically diverse. And so the last theme that I'm going to talk about is racial stereotypes, where Black girls had to sort of go in this space and had to deal with people viewing them differently. And so she talks about even though this was a racially and ethnically diverse environment, she stated that because these Black girls hung around with each other, that they were called the ghetto group. Because they were the only Black girls in that school. And so again, this corroborates previous literature about Black girls' experiences within these particular settings. And then also, this Black girl talks about incidences that happened to her when she was in 4th or 5th grade, because she was very playful. At the time, she acknowledged that, but teachers automatically assumed that she was having an attitude with them when they used to reprimand her. And then they kept making her get in trouble for some of the smallest things. This young lady also talked about how that impacted her behavior report and sort of prevented her from going to the middle school that she wanted to go to, because she had this long record of sort of misbehavior that was noted by these teachers. And so it ended up making her very angry. And so this would sort of perpetuate the cycle of her being disciplined differently than her other peers in that school. And so just in summary, what I gave you all was just some quotes that was from this very rich data, this qualitative data that I did with Black girls and sort of centering and honoring their voices. And these findings corroborate previous literatures found in national reports and empirical studies that really highlight discipline, the racial and gender stereotypes that Black girls have to deal with, the lack of support that is received, issues of colorism, and just lower academic expectations. And I hope that I left with you all just going through some of these quotes and really highlighting the history of Black women into Black girlhood, that Black girls' experiences we cannot continue to be ignored, misunderstood, or untold. And that we have to really underscore the importance of Black girls' space and centering Black girls' voices at this particular moment to come up with these anti-racist and anti-sexist solutions. And so what are the implications? And so I think that we need professional development training that needs to be intersectional, and it needs to be intentional. Anti-racist and anti-sexist. We need to increase the representation of teachers of color. Right now, we know nationally 80% of teachers are white. In the state of Missouri, over 90% of teachers are white. We know that teachers that are racially and ethnically diverse is not only beneficial for Black students, but it's beneficial for everybody. And so teachers need to be reflective of the populations that we serve. We also know that there needs to be support for Black teachers. It was absolutely devastating for me to hear students talk about Black teachers knowing that they're being treated differently, but not being able to defend them because they have to obey by the rules. And so we need to sort of reevaluate what we're doing there. This has implications on social work curriculum when we prepare our school social workers going out, making sure that they have an intersectional lens and making sure that they are censoring Black girls' voices in ways that are not harmful to them. Even in our research methods, we have to really be focused and be intentional about unlearning, focusing on race or gender as independent constructs. And we need to really parse out and disaggregate these data sources so we can be able to really talk about and honor the lived experiences of Black girls. And so I just want to leave you all with the fact that Black girls matter. And I think that we should be intentional in telling their stories and recognizing their voices. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Butler-Barnes. You gave us, I know we didn't afford you a lot of time, but you cut to the core, very tough issues in this space. And I would welcome the audience to pose questions for our keynote speaker. In the meantime, let me just start off with one overarching question.
Mm-hmm.
Given your work and in this space, are there models of successful intervention that really honors this experience of Black girls and addresses it, proactively?
Yeah.
Both at the school system, but also maybe in the general community.
So there's a couple of questions with that. So there's a couple of, not questions, but there's a couple of statements I want to make with that. The first is that Sister Nia, the work by Faye Belgrave, is very purposeful in really centering and empowering Black girls within the spaces that they're in. But also, we don't have that many interventions that are really dedicated to the needs of Black girls that are intersectional. We have the creation of spaces, and there are some scholars in math education who are doing this work, and they're doing this work well. But Black girl cartography is something that I did not have that much time to talk about, but this is where we began to use a lens from the researcher in terms of how have we been socialized to think about Black girls? How does that show up in our practice work? How does that show up in our research? And then from there, we allow Black girls to define and create the spaces that are safe for them. So I hope that answers your question. Overall, we need more work centering Black girls and interventions.
So let me pose one question from the audience. That is, for instance, can you speak about the impact your findings on Black girls' mental health?
Oh, absolutely. I think that it is something that's understudied. I think that the way in which we view the superwoman schema that people attribute to Black women as if they are very strong, they're very resilient, they're very tough. We need to understand that that's happening in Black girlhood, and that Black girls are viewed as adult-like. So that means that they have thicker skin and they can take things differently. And that's absolutely not the case. These girls were devastated and horrified telling these stories. And in some instances, some of them didn't even want to share these experiences with their parents for fear that their parents, as one student so eloquently said, that she may end up in jail. And so again, this is just, it's devastating that we're in like 2021 and we have not centered or really talked about Black girls' mental health at all. But these findings really point to the need for us to begin to do it. I mean, it's imperative we have to.
So there's a couple more questions here. Let me pose part of the question. That is, there must be actionable things that we must do from the point of view of universities to start to make a difference in this, not only in this work, but particularly for Black girls, in school systems and in communities in general, right? Yep. So we in the School of Social Work are thinking, our faculty are really thinking about a Black Leadership Initiative in the School of Social Work. Now, training social workers to be in school systems to focus on these is one thing. But could you also speak to how we could partner with our School of Education, the Lynch School of Education?
Absolutely.
How can social work and education engage in some actionable work?
Yeah, yeah. And so that's a wonderful question, because a lot of the leaders in this field and really centering Black girl voice are in the field of education. Like, they're in education and they're doing this work, and they're doing this work well. And I think it's imperative that we partner. I think that education has the language in terms of being able to talk about intersectionality, how that may show up in classrooms, the how different social identities impact kids and settings. And I'm not sure within our social work curriculum if we're having those honest conversations. And also in terms of what education and social work can both do is that, before we do this work and we do this work well, I'm always coming from the perspective of being a Black girl, being a Black woman, that we want to make sure that we are not harmful to the communities that we serve. And I think a lot of us need to do our work in how we were initially introduced to Black girlhood or Black girls, or what our experiences were like, or addressing our own stereotypes and biases. I think that collectively education has something to offer, because and social work does, because it's both practitioners that are doing this work. And I think it needs to come with strong theory. I think it has to come with uncomfortable conversations in order for us to partner with school districts and to really identify the needs of Black girls. So we have to go beyond gap gazing. Gap gazing is something I talk about if we just look at education statistics and just like to load people up with stereotypes without really understanding their lived experiences. And I think once we sort of work through all of that, I think that we can join forces and do this work well. I'm hopeful.
Mm-hmm. Just your response triggered another aspect in this collaboration between social work and education. Education could take the lead, perhaps, and I'm going to make a comment for you to respond if I'm on point here.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, education could take the lead in the teacher trainings and so on,
Mm-hmm.
with a particular emphasis on Black girls and how to proactively work well, not just in the context of a classroom, but also before, during, and after. Whereas social work could be working in placing school social workers that would be supporting students, because
Mm-hmm.
you can never really anticipate how other students are going to be managing these conversations.
That's right.
Some can come to the rescue of a Black girl that is facing a very tough situation. Others might chime in to further marginalize somebody. But that's where a social work counselor in a school system can come in to work with teachers who are well trained in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's power in that kind of, thinking.
It absolutely is. And one of the things I don't want us to forget is that while we are trying to serve girls, while there is training, teacher training, social work training, in order for us to really understand what Black girls are going through, we have to have them at the table as well, too, telling us these stories. We have to. Because what was interesting about this project was that, this was a socioeconomically diverse sample of Black girls who attended different sort of school settings, and all of their experiences were similar. So when we do this work, make sure we have them at the table so they can be able to tell us what they need, because we are here to serve. Mm-hmm. So I just want to make that clear.
Yeah. There also, how about we go to one more question, and then I want to turn to Professor Pinderhughes.
Mm-hmm.
What about, creating these elective courses within the social work curriculum that addresses
mm-hmm.
kinds of concerns?
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing is, maybe we should have the Council on Social Work Education really make this as part of their accreditations.
They have, yeah, absolutely.
Expectations.
Yes, yes. Yes, I mean, when we, and then we just talked about like race and gender. I mean, we highlight, I touched on class, but if we consider different other sorts of social identities and the way in which they operate, pulling on really the thought of Kimberly Crenshaw, we cannot continue to use one size fits all models for everybody. We can't do that. Sojourner Truth said that, Mary Church Terrell. I mean, we've seen this since the 19th century. We have to now be action oriented. So I absolutely agree.
Thank you so much. And we're just beginning here. So I want to bring Professor Pinderhughes to sort of give her thoughts. Maybe if she has a question to ask you, but also engage in further exploration of this. Professor Pinderhughes, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to recognize the benefit that this study offers for us to look historically at these issues and see what is happening that is good and what is happening that is not good. Because when I was a young girl and in school, the issue was not the same. The system took care of some of it. Yes, there was segregation, but at the same time, Black girls were didn't pay a price that white girls didn't pay. If you see what I'm saying, when I was growing up, and I remember looking at my own experience and saying, that's not what happened to us. And it was because it was a positive that came from segregation, if you see what I'm saying, because it was different for it was already different for Black girls in those situations. So I commend you for helping us to look at history, and we can ask ourselves, is it better or is it worse? And can we answer this honestly? And we can say for some it's better and for some it's not. I think this is a study that gives us a chance to see these issues and to check history and look at our society and say, are we really doing better or are we not? And the answer is sometimes yes and sometimes no. Today, the answer today.
One of the things, Mom.
Yes.
One of the things that you and I had talked about as we were thinking about the presentation was the way in which there needs to be this explicit focus on racial identity and racial socialization, and how different it was for you. Do you want to comment a little bit about that?
How different it was for me?
For you attending Dunbar and attending school behind the walls of segregation.
Right. Well, that was precisely what I was saying about history and being able to see what went on at a different time. And at a different time, I think as a Black girl, I did not automatically, I was not exposed to this kind of prejudice, but the whole system, because it was a system of segregation, everybody in the system was exposed to it, if you see what I'm saying. So we need to understand what the role of history is and the degree to which, whether things are better now or worse now for Black girls. And the answer is for some, yes, and for some, no.
Professor Pinderhughes, let me interject one interesting thought by one of our participants in this talk. Perhaps after segregation, a lot of the Black teachers actually were laid off, and there were effects of that too, in addition to these mixed schools that really didn't know how to handle, to Professor Butler-Barnes's point. I don't know, do you want to come in on this? Both of you, I'm talking.
I'm not sure I understand the point you're making.
Well, I think there was this question that, or this thought that in desegregating, we never prepared ourselves for these newer problems. While segregation as a system, as you rightly pointed out, was wrong, but it had these outcomes because of the segregation. But once, we had schools that were integrated, supposedly integrated, still practicing, didn't know how to handle this new. Maybe Professor Butler-Barnes, you want to come in on some of that?
Yeah, I mean, no, I understand what you're saying, and Dr. Pinderhughes has a wonderful point. Professor Pinderhughes has a wonderful point, but I just wanted to say that this is interesting because this is something that I've been grappling with for some time. And so we have Black families who are sending their children to places, to schools that are racially, ethnically diverse, or they're in communities where that school is the best school system, like a Clayton here, but yet Black girls are still sort of being underserved. And in some sense, even though they think like Black girls were particularly alarmed that even though their school in this study was racially and ethnically diverse, that they were still segregated when they were in the school. They weren't in honors classes, they weren't in the AP classes, and yet they were still treated as inferior. Like the one young lady who said, oh, I have a high IQ, I am in this class, but others don't want me to be. I don't think we prepare for that because we've always thought that to be in a space of whiteness meant that the opportunities are very different and that you should just sort of be grateful. And I don't think we have these honest conversations. And sure, we have things at the systemic level, but I always emphasize to people that there are like these different forms of racism. And what these Black girls are talking about is the very interpersonal interactions that stem from systemic, but very everyday, personal, racial experiences where they have like no support from the teachers in the school. They can't even go to any sort of administration. And then they're also scared to inform their parents about it. And this is something that we just did, that I don't think we paid attention to as much. So I absolutely agree with both points that you all are making. If that makes sense, I hope that makes sense.
There's a comment in the chat, Mom, that I think you would appreciate hearing and commenting on. It has to do with chosen segregation versus forced. And this person is commenting that where the power is located when segregation occurs really matters. And I know you and I have talked a lot about Dunbar, your alma mater, and the power that was situated within that school behind the walls of segregation. So any thoughts about this comment?
Well, Dunbar represented, it was an intentionally developed to be a rigorous school that only students whose families were able to support them to be in that school and to work that hard and et cetera, would be able to succeed. So it was a systemic way of separating students. Do you see? There was separation that went on, and there was a payment that certain students who couldn't go to Dunbar and did not have the resources to support the effort that needed to be made to stay in that school, there was still a segregation. It was a different kind. It was a total systemic segregation that went on when I was in school. So it was not fair, certainly not fair in the sense of the opportunities that were available to every Black girl or boy.
Any last thoughts you would want to share around the issue of the needs of Black girls, the needs to understand Black girls and to affirm them as we are in the 21st century?
Well, I think in teacher training, this is an issue that needs to be addressed. It needs to be brought up, just like we bring up the issue of racial identity and differentness and how it should be dealt with across the board. This should be an issue in teacher training. And there are people who do not know how to deal with this. Today, when we have everybody in a teacher training institution that doesn't address this issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying that it does need to be addressed, just as we take out other issues related to racial and ethnic identity and say the teacher must be able to deal with this. We have special, we give opportunity to look at the fact that there are these differences exist, and teachers must be trained to be able to deal with all students and their uniqueness. We do that now. That is a part of our teacher training. And what I'm saying is that in those days, when I was young, it was not done because the system did it.
Mm-hmm.
The system did it. And that is a big difference.
No, thank you for sharing it. I absolutely agree. I just think education is doing this work well. I just wish that we would, in other disciplines, really understand the unique needs of Black girls and really increase the visibility of them, because for Black girls to be sharing these stories in like 2017, 2018 about what's happening and to not feel supported in this setting, and even for Black teachers, we have a lot of work to do. Yeah. We have a lot of work to do. Yeah.
Professor Pinderhughes, parting thoughts before we close this year's lecture.
Well, I just think that this issue should be an issue that is in every teacher training institution, and it needs attention because there often are white people who feel they can't teach this. They can't do this because it's not been their experience. So we need to train them. So even though things have changed, they haven't changed in some ways for Black girls, if you see what I'm saying.
That's absolutely right, Professor Pinderhughes. Absolutely right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Pinderhughes, for, we were a little concerned again during COVID how to do this, but, you were such a sport in saying, let's just do it virtually. And it's been wonderful to host Professor Butler-Barnes. And I know she really wanted to engage you last year, and we got that opportunity. It was, and in the process, we've had nearly 150 people attend this lecture. And if you look at the chat, there's a lot of great interest in this topic. So I want to thank you, Professor Butler-Barnes, for bringing clear attention to this. And I think this is something that the School of Social Work and the Link School of Education and Human Development at Boston College probably should engage in at a deeper level.
Absolutely.
And we want to thank you for bringing attention to that. And Professor Pinderhughes, I want to thank you for being here. Please go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, just thank you so much for this opportunity. And the thing about it is that I'm looking at the chats, and I absolutely love what people are saying, but it's also heartbreaking to me to also see that the experiences that I'm talking about, that it resonates with so many of the attendees because of them being a Black woman who was once a Black girl. So I just want to sort of acknowledge that.
Yes, and in fact, it looks like this is through the life course. It just continues.
Absolutely. Pre-K on up. Yep.
So with that, we want to thank both Professor Butler-Barnes and Professor Pinderhughes for this year's Pinderhughes lecture. Thank you all for coming and for really this vigorous discussion on the basis of Professor Butler-Barnes' research. And have a good afternoon, and we will see you all at the next lecture, and of course, at next Pinderhughes lecture next year, and other events in between. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen?